What elevates The Witcher 3 above most RPGs for me is the incomparably large number of unforeseen consequences in its gameplay and story. They feel omnipresent, even in the most seemingly minor side quests, where many RPGs will rely on meaningless side quest staples like fetch quests or escort missions to pad the main story. The Witcher 3 attempts to make a majority of its quests memorable by inserting some sort of moral dilemma. By that, I mean a true moral dilemma, not one where both the good and bad choices are obvious, but where most decisions are morally gray and tend to have powerful, long-lasting repercussions. The best part, or some might say worst part, about these hard-hitting decisions is that they are usually the ones we thought were best. This is meant to induce reflection in the gamer, to make them question if they could have made better choices, or if the whims of fate predetermined that all outcomes would be equally bad, if different. Often, it does not seem to matter how thoroughly we assess a character or situation, the chaos and tragedy of this fantasy world will consistently undermine our perceptions, and ridicule the notion of a moral compass or a wholesome happy ending. I have played a lot of great games that challenge your perceptions, that force you to contend with the cruelty of fate and what is within your control. But maybe the best quest that I've ever played in this regard is The Witcher 3's Bloody Baron quest line. This is not just my sentiment. A quick glance at any article, video, or message board talking about the best quests in The Witcher 3 tend to place the Bloody Baron quest line at the top of the list. This is because it is a perfect microcosm of the game's overall themes of misperception and unforeseen consequences. Throughout this questline, the game provokes you to make snap judgments about its central figure, Philip Strenger, aka the Bloody Baron. Yet every time you make a judgment, it is not only continuously betrayed and punished, any attempts to remedy your perception of this character are also consistently betrayed. He is the personification of a walking contradiction, and any attempts to define him in a way that is universally accepted is futile. It would not be unreasonable to characterize the Bloody Baron purely as a villain, because he committed some of the most heinous acts a man can commit. But for every person that casts him purely as a villain, there will be a person who will point to the events that motivated his villainy and emphasize his desire to atone. To be honest, I cannot begrudge either point of view, because one's final assessment of the Bloody Baron, whether we like it or not, is likely a reflection of our backgrounds and our deepest values. For instance, those who strictly villainize him probably know somebody like him in real life, somebody who is abusive to their family, and are fully conscious of the damage they brought about. Very hard to argue against that. But there are also those who would like to humanize the Bloody Baron. One such group of people might be veterans who, like the Baron, have struggled with PTSD, another position that is hard to argue against. These and other contradictory traits formulate a psyche that is as fascinating as it is difficult to contend with. This is because an honest contention with the mind of the Bloody Baron is a simultaneous contention with your innermost self. And terrifyingly, it is one that might not seem too dissimilar to your own. Today, I want to try and make sense of one of the best written characters and one of the best written quest lines in gaming history. Before I do, I will kindly ask that if you enjoy this video, or have enjoyed my videos in the past, please give it a like. Finally, if you enjoy this type of gaming analysis that I do here, please consider supporting me on Patreon or joining my YouTube members section. I will leave links to both in the description box below. Now, let's begin. As we know, the story of The Witcher 3 focuses primarily on Geralt, seeking out his daughter figure Ciri. Towards the beginning of his journey, he is brought to the region of Velen, a land devastated by the war between the Nilfgaardian Empire and the Northern Kingdoms. At the moment, the de facto ruler is the aforementioned Philip Bloody Baron Strenger. He formerly fought for Temeria, the province to which Velen belonged, but his unit was almost completely destroyed near the start of the Third Northern War. Following this, he, along with several other estranged men and deserters, sauntered north until they happened upon the palisade hold known as Crow's Perch. Seeing that it was abandoned by its former lord, Philip and the men following him took over. When the Nilfgaardians caught wind of this, Philip knew that it would be pointless to resist, so he catered to their whims in the hope that he, at some point, would be made an official baron. Recently, the baron's wife and daughter, Anna and Tamara, went missing under mysterious circumstances, but luckily for him, fate brought another man seeking out his loved ones to his doorstep. During Geralt's search for Ciri, he discovered a clue from a dead Nilfgaardian spy, a document suggesting that Ciri encountered the Bloody Baron at one point, which naturally causes the two to meet. Prior to the meeting, one might suspect that the Bloody Baron might be deeply unpleasant to say the least, given his title and the current state of Velen under his rule. But this initial judgment is quickly challenged upon our first encounter. Provided you didn't kill his men earlier on in the game, Philip greets you with a jovial temperament, generously offering you alcohol to help ease the cloud of gloom that not only hangs over Velen, but their similar circumstances. The most relieving thing, perhaps, is Philip's confirmation that he not only encountered Ciri, but sheltered her, along with an abandoned child that she met named Gretka. Not only that, he went above and beyond to make sure Gretka had a better life at Crow's Perch than she ever could have imagined, making sure she, quote, wants for nothing, and that the Palisade Hold's almost universally male population never harassed her, just as he did for Anna and Tamara. This all makes Philip out to be an affable, caring man. Granted, he does withhold information regarding where Ciri went after her arrival at Crow's Perch, in order to motivate Geralt to search for his wife and daughter. Yet despite the slightly domineering nature of this arrangement, Geralt puts up no resistance, likely due to both Philip's decency and their commiserating circumstances. Geralt begins his search by investigating the Baron's master bedroom. In there, he uncovers evidence of a struggle. Marks on a post, a candlestick snapped in two, and wine spilled on the floor. When Geralt presents this evidence to Philip, he gives two pieces of information. First, that it's impossible any outsiders or any of Philip's men could have attacked his wife and daughter, given their constant surveillance. And second, that he was so drunk that night that he couldn't remember a thing. There is one last piece of evidence, which, inevitably, is what leads to the truth behind this disturbance. Geralt uncovers an amulet that belonged to Anna. When presented to Philip, he tells Geralt that she got it from a local peller, an alternate name for a sorcerer. He intends to go and ask the peller about the amulet's purpose, but before he leaves, Philip warns Geralt about the peller being difficult to talk to, supposedly due to madness brought about by killing his father in his youth. Upon arrival at the peller's hut, Geralt finds a man that, surprisingly, does not match Philip's description. He is perfectly lucid and easy to understand, even if he is a bit eccentric. He tells Geralt that he gave Anna the amulet to protect her from evil omens that surrounded her, but he does not say what these omens were. Thankfully, though, he helps Geralt in a different way. He performs a blood ritual to determine where Philip's wife and daughter are located, but in doing so, he gleans a deeply unsettling piece of information. In his ecstatic state, the peller sees blood. But not blood belonging to Anna or Tamara, rather to another child of Philip's, one that, according to the peller, was miscarried. But the peller says this miscarriage was not accidental. Instead, it was likely brought about by Philip when he beat Anna in a drunken rage. As much as this revelation might sting, it does make sense, especially due to the fact that prior to Geralt's arrival, Philip's men were standing outside his door, likely intending to kill him in order to prevent the truth from slipping. Disgusted by this deception, Geralt returns to Crow's Perch to confront the Bloody Baron, only to find that the barn at the top of the settlement was set on fire, a product of the Baron's drunken stupor. Thankfully, nobody was hurt aside from those who tried to calm the Baron down, a feat that only Geralt was able to accomplish with fists of righteous fury. Naturally, I would not begrudge anybody who takes satisfaction in this, and that's especially true in regard to Geralt. I can easily see how these revelations would turn the Baron into a symbolic reflection of Geralt's inner darkness. I'm sure that the combination of Geralt's brutal profession and the pressures that came with raising Ciri might have tempted him to give into his more violent impulses. Though he never did, that darkness likely never went away. And here, it was virtually incarnated. So of course he beat the hell out of the Baron. At this point, the information we have gleaned about the Baron puts him, in my opinion, beyond forgiveness. He is not only a drunk and a wife-beater, but the combination of both led to the miscarriage of his unborn child. If I were in Geralt's shoes, I would not be inclined to listen to anything this man would have to say in his defense. But interestingly, the Baron actually does very little to defend himself. Aside from a vague reference to something that his wife did, he spends the majority of the next several minutes telling the truth and taking responsibility, going so far as to reveal the most self-deprecating details. In short, Philip had been drinking for 3 days straight. This was the final straw for Anna, who then told Philip that she and Tamara were leaving him willingly. This led to a drunken altercation where Anna hit Philip in the head with a candlestick, knocking him out. When he woke up, his clothes were soaked with urine, and he didn't know what day it was. He then walked up the stairs to the bedchamber, opened the door, and saw blood all over the floor.
It lay there, a tiny thing, defenseless, on bloodied sheets, dead. And it was my doing.
I was surprised by the acknowledgement of his wrongdoing, by his wilting posture, and the silent scream of his soul. I must admit, I felt just a tinge of sympathy for him, but it was one that I had to quickly ignore, for there was someone who needed that sympathy more at that moment. Sometimes, when a baby dies during childbirth, if the circumstances surrounding their death are uniquely immoral and tragic, they do not fully pass on. Instead, they become a ravenous botchling. As we found out from the Peller earlier on, this was the fate that befell Philip and Anna's child. Luckily, even this immensely cruel circumstance had a silver lining. By performing a ritual, not only could the child pass on, but it would turn into what is known as a lubberkin, a helpful spirit that would lead Geralt to both Anna and Tamara. Geralt and the Baron then walked out into a tempestuous storm, over to the site where his child had been buried. When they arrived, they found the partially decayed fetus had sprung from the earth. It wriggled and writhed. Its features were a macabre illustration of the behavior that birthed it, and the world that allowed it to happen. Most importantly, just as the Baron was symbolic of Geralt's inner darkness, the botchling was symbolic of the Baron's, and now he had to confront it.
What now?
Repeat after me. By the powers of earth and sky.
By the powers of earth and sky.
By the world that was to be your home.
By the world that was to be your home.
Forgive me, you who came, but who I did not embrace.
Forgive me, you who came, but who I did not embrace.
I name thee, say her name, and embrace thee as my daughter.
I name thee, Daya, and embrace thee as my daughter.
Once again, the Baron's behavior provokes a series of reasonable reactions. Some might understandably delight in the justice of this abusive man's punishment. Others might ponder if the regret he feels is genuine, and if even he could find some form of redemption. I, however, was preoccupied with the fact that the Baron, though abusive, did not fit many of the criteria of a traditionally abusive man. Due to this, I relented from further condemning him or immediately forgiving him. Instead, I was more inclined to first try and understand him, his history as a soldier, as a family man, and how that evolved him from Philip Strenger into the Bloody Baron. First, I turned to a book on the psychology of abusive men, one titled Why Does He Do That? By Lundy Bancroft. In it, he lists the most common traits of abusive men, and aside from 2 or 3, the Baron's behavior generally does not align with most of them. Starting with the criteria that do apply, the first and most obvious one is that he is addicted to alcohol. This makes perfect sense, given that roughly 40% of the time that abuse is committed, it's done by people under the influence. The next is that he is concerned with maintaining his reputation. This also applies to the Baron, but only to an extent. He didn't reveal the truth behind what happened between him and his family initially, and even went to extreme lengths to hide it. But when the truth came out, his reputation seemed the least of his concerns, even going so far as to actively demean it. The only other trait that I think might stick is the tendency for men to project a false image onto their significant other. He says that when he first met Anna, it was, quote, love at first sight for both of them. One could reasonably interpret this as the Baron not seeing Anna for who she is, but seeing his fantasy of her. And according to Bancroft, if the woman fails to live up to that image, he may turn nasty, which is exactly what happened. Though the same could be said in reverse for Anna, but we'll address that in a moment. As for the other criteria, some either don't apply, or they do, but only to a tenuous degree. An abusive man tends to never admit fault, or if they do, they deflect blame or justify their actions due to past trauma or injustice. Not only does the Baron admit fault, he is slow to deflect blame. Typically, the abusive man is self-centered, whereas the Baron has demonstrated he not only has the capacity to be selfless, but to go above and beyond for his family and for complete strangers. He would even go so far as to get specific flowers for both Anna and Tamara that they requested, even though they all knew full well that those particular flowers grew days away from where they lived. Even before he became a somewhat wealthy baron, he would make dolls for his daughter out of wood and rags. Now there is the matter of possessive attitudes towards women, and it's reasonable to say that this applies to the Baron, but there are several factors that complicate this notion. To explain why, we should address what his wife did to spark his ire. For much of his life, the Baron has not had a steady home because he has moved from battlefield to battlefield, fighting for the kingdom of Temeria. Therefore, he was often not around to attend to his duties as a father or husband. Frustrated and unsatisfied, Anna found the intimate love and companionship she was lacking in her childhood friend, Evan. And for a period of 3 years, she kept an affair with Evan a secret from the Baron. Shortly after the Baron found out about the affair, Anna left the Baron a letter saying that she was leaving and taking Tamara with her. In a rage, he sought out Evan, slaughtered him, and fed his carcass to the dogs. Of course, this is a completely unacceptable response, regardless if one can sympathize with the Baron's anger. But to the original point, it can be argued that this type of response was due to a possessive attitude towards women, one where their feelings are disregarded in favor of the man's. This is true to a degree, but like I said, it's not that simple. First, the Baron said he would have forgiven her if she had merely slept with another man once, which is a surprisingly liberal attitude to have in a medieval-esque world where the rights and freedoms of women were given less respect. Second, while the Baron wasn't able to be around as much as was ideal, That's an unfortunate reality of life, and that is especially true when you're a medieval soldier and your kingdom is under existential threat. In order to keep the family together, in order to do what was best for their child, it was incumbent on Anna to accept the harshness of her situation and take responsibility, which in part meant accepting the traditional gender role of a faithful wife and mother, just as the Baron tried to do the same when he could as a father and husband. Unfortunately, both failed in this regard. With Anna, it was largely due to her infidelity, and with the Baron, it was largely due to alcohol. Ultimately, it's alcohol that appears to be the primary culprit behind the Baron's abuse and the tragedy that resulted from it. While he shouldn't have turned to it as a way to cope with his problems, nor should anybody for that matter, it's easier said than done. The Baron's life has been one of war, fighting for a side that was perpetually losing, all while trying to provide for the people that he loved. When living in a world that reinforces traditional forms of stoic masculinity, when there are no mental health resources to turn to, it's easy to see why one would try to find comfort through alcohol when responsibility suffocates you, and omnipresent death traumatizes your mind. Nonetheless, it should go without saying that there is no excuse for abuse. Moreover, it's important to acknowledge, as Lundy Bancroft says, that even under the influence, the choice to abuse is made consciously. What the Baron did was conscious. It was villainous and deserving of punishment, but it would be dishonest to ignore the circumstances that brought about that behavior. And it would be especially dishonest to suggest he was solely at fault. Let's not forget also that some things we initially thought he did were later revealed to not be his fault. For instance, he did not cause Anna's miscarriage. Rather, she used magic to induce an abortion. As the blackness of the Baron's initial villainy gave way to innumerable shades of gray, I found myself constantly reflecting on all the snap judgments I made. Though my opinion of the Baron being a villain did not change, what did change was my opinion on whether he deserved mercy. I'm sure many could envision themselves falling prey to weakness if they were in the Baron's shoes. And when that happened, I'm sure many of us would be sorry and want the chance to do better. Though thankfully, life can have a lot of moments where we can choose to do better, the chaotic, war-torn world of The Witcher 3 tends to not offer that clemency. Towards the end of the quest line, we find that Tamara is safe in Oxenfurt, but Anna is in a swamp looking after orphans. Unfortunately, she is being closely watched by 3 dangerous witches, known as the Crones of Crookback Bog. At one point, Geralt comes across a spirit in a tree, which proclaims that the lives of both Anna and the orphans are threatened by the witches. The spirit offers to save the orphans if Geralt frees it. However, the trustworthiness of this spirit is in question, as Geralt finds out from a local village. The denizens there say that the spirit in the tree is responsible for several deaths. If we choose to kill the spirit, the local village is saved, but the witches presumably kill the orphans, which causes Anna so much grief that it causes her mind to break. If we choose to free the spirit, it continues to terrorize the town, though it saves the orphans. This, however, displeases the witches so much that they cast a curse on Anna, turning her into a water hag. Though Geralt can either fail or succeed at lifting the curse, the result remains the same. The witch's curse is a death sentence either way. Now regarding the Baron, if we pursue the first ending, he gets his second chance. He promises Tamara and Geralt that he will seek out a healer that lives in the Blue Mountains, a gifted healer whom the Baron is familiar with. Though their ultimate fate is never known, there is at least the possibility that the Baron and his family can start again. However, if we pursue the second or third ending, the Baron resolves that the death of Anna renders his life wasted and ruined, and thus commits self-termination. No matter what ending you choose, both come with negative, unforeseen consequences. This absence of control is a gut punch, one that induces reflection, not only about the uniquely cruel world of The Witcher, but how similar it might be to our own, in respect to how much, if anything, is in our control. Are we slaves to snap judgments, to our inner demons and the invisible hand of fate? Or do we sometimes, if not always, have a choice in the way our lives unfold? Thankfully, not only the game, but the psychological research indicates the latter. The aforementioned Lundy Bancroft says that the number one factor that causes abuse is our conscious decision to act abusive. Though our inner violent tendencies might emerge from unconscious complexes, the decision to be violent is conscious. Though life can be unbearably difficult, the Bloody Baron's story shows that it is within our capacity to make it worse. Hopefully, the poor example he set is strong enough that it will motivate all of us to choose non-violence, and occasionally, to extend mercy to those who fail.